In today's video, I'm going to be giving you all of the tips and tricks I possibly can for working with epoxy. In videos like this, the expectation is that someone will say things like, keep your workspace clean and make sure to mix your epoxy thoroughly. But that is not what this video is. This video is all of the secret hidden tips and tricks that nobody's talking about. On top of tons of free information, I'm also going to be giving away a 1.5 gallon, 2 to 4 inch thick pour kit from Super Clear Epoxy. So stay tuned to the end of the video for that. Alright, straight out the gate, just to show you how serious and legitimate this epoxy hack video is. Hack number 1 is all about mixing. Everyone has their own way of mixing. They buy special tools for mixing. Maybe you grab an old piece of wood and stir gently because you don't want to mix bubbles in. But you may actually have the best epoxy mixing tool in your shop right now and not even know it. This is my epoxy mixing paddle bit. And all that this guy is a hole boring tool that goes into your drill for popping 3/4 or 1/2 inch holes in your material. But these guys go dull really fast, and when they do, instead of tossing them in the trash, all you have to do is take and break that tip off, and this guy will become the perfect epoxy mixing weapon. And yes, obviously you don't want to stir bubbles in, so put your drill on a low setting and just watch that pigment dissolve into your epoxy and everything mix up appropriately. Hack number 2 is a quick one, and it piggybacks right on the back of hack number 1, and that is when you're done mixing and you're done pouring, leave this guy inside of your measuring cup, inside of your leftover epoxy. That way, when it hardens, you can take and pull on your tool and it will cleanly come out of your mixing cup, and you can reuse that cup over and over and over again. Hack number 3, a lot of times when it comes to wood and epoxy, you're gonna be using live edge wood because it just looks the best with a transparent fill right up on it. And if you wanna do a nice, beautiful square cutting board, a piece of wood like this, with epoxy filling this space, would look amazing. With all that being said, if you are using wood like this, you have to seal the edges of your live edges. All of this material in here is gonna release bubbles into your epoxy, and you do not want that. On top of that, you need to debark all of this stuff right here because it's coming off at some point, whether you do it or it does it to itself. So do it now so that it doesn't do it in a year from now with epoxy attached to it. Hack or tip number 4, if you do have bubbles and you need to deal with them after your epoxy has hardened and set up, first thing you need to do is take and pop that bubble or clear out that hole and make it a little bit bigger. After that, you want to clean it out, clean it up, make sure there's no dust trapped in there, and you can come back in and layer in some epoxy and then just sand it down and sand it all the way up to whatever grit you're using. Even if your bubbles are a little deeper, I would suggest getting in there and doing this method because it's worth it in the end for a clear, clean finish. Speaking of bubbles, when it comes to bubbles, there's a lot of debate on if a torch or a heat gun is the preferred method for popping those. I would say that the torch is more powerful and just immediately pops them, but if you're a bonehead like me, having a torch in your hand is not always ideal. When it comes to methodology, if you are using your blowtorch, you just want to crank this bad boy on, be about 6 inches away from your epoxy, and obviously do not burn your molds with your torch. Run it across your epoxy really fast and it'll pop those bubbles. What I will say is that you should always be checking on your epoxy because secondary bubbles will manifest after you've popped your primary bubbles. And I would say check hourly, honestly. Alright, so a lot of people will buy the HDPE hold downs for epoxy tables and cutting boards and stuff like that if you need to hold your material down because it wants to float up in your epoxy. But not me. I use a little piece of scrap wood and 3 screws. This has got to be the cheapest method on the planet. All you have to do is take your hold down, lay it over your epoxy project, screw the outside screws directly into your table, and on that center screw, you're just going to screw it down not into your material, but onto your material so it pushes downward pressure and holds everything right where it belongs. Hacks like this are made when you're cheap, lazy, and a genius. And if you want to be fancy like me, you can use walnut. That way you feel a little less ghetto. I've used several different epoxies, and Super Clear Epoxy has been the best, bar none. I make myself giggle because every single time my epoxy clears and hardens, I say to myself, wow, that's super clear. I know, I'm sorry, but it is true. I'm using the liquid glass 2 to 4 inch thick pour kit, which if you happen to be a subscriber, you could possibly win for free. If you're a subscriber, comment in the comment section what you would do with this epoxy, and I'll pick one of you guys to ship this kit out to absolutely free. Anyways, more about the epoxy. These guys are perfect for a thick pour and an ultra clear finish. I have worked with epoxies that yellowed over time very quickly, and so far, Super Clear has stood the test of time. If you want to argue in the comment section about what you think is the best epoxy resin, I'm totally okay with that. I'm totally fine if you're not using the same things as me. But if you are using the Super Clear epoxy, I have a link in the description that you can get a little bit cheaper and I get a little kickback. So let's work together. For this next hack, I have to mention a dilemma that I mentioned earlier in this video, and that is having leftover epoxy. Before I said leave a stick in there so you can pull it out, but the goal is to not have leftover epoxy. So when it comes to measuring that epoxy, if you don't happen to be a genius and you have trouble measuring volume, you can do the rice trick. You simply fill up the space where you'd like to pour your epoxy all the way up to the brim with rice, take that rice, put it in your measuring cup, and that'll give you the exact amount of epoxy that you'll need. After that, measure and pour your epoxy, mix in your pigment, and then pour it into your mold. If that trick doesn't work for you, you always need to have silicone molds laying around where you can pour your extra epoxy for cool little things like these hearts. Or a coaster for a shot glass maybe. And having smaller silicone molds around that are actually useful is always a plus as well. One thing that I didn't ever get information on before working with epoxy was how to make my pigments look mystical at all times, because I mixed pigment into epoxy, poured it into a mold, let it set, and after I came back overnight, it all kind of settled down and didn't look as beautiful as I wanted it to. So now, so that you don't have those same problems, I would definitely recommend coming back every hour to 2 hours, stirring up your epoxy until it's about honey consistency. And then by that time, you should stop touching it. The pigment should be setting up really well in the epoxy, and it should thicken up in its most beautiful state possible. I did this Texas last night, and it still has that galaxy look because I tended to it often, and now because I nurtured it, it looks beautiful. Hey, thanks for watching. If you have any obscure, random epoxy tips that no one knows about, be sure not to comment them in the comment section. DM them to me. I'll make a video covering all of them, and I'll take all of the credit. Thanks, I'll see you in the next one. Bye!